Hi everybody, this is my fourth video in a while. It's mid-March of 2021 and this evening I would like to talk about why am I doing this? Why did I even start Reiki? Why did I become a holistic life coach? The reason why I do this is because I get it. I know what it's like. I've been there, I've done it in a nutshell. The longer version of my story is I grew up developing anxiety, PTSD, and other issues, mental health issues, because I had a father who was a narcissist, to put it bluntly, and my mother was the complete opposite. Like, I grew up with people who were completely opposite from each other, and my mother was not really able to say, stop it, this is not right, or anything like to defend herself or defend me. It was really hard even to defend us. And my father did not take no for an answer, no matter what situation it was, no matter why, and it was just really hard growing up in his household. And I only started realizing what kind of person he was when I was 16 or 17 years old. It's I'm not even sure exactly what happened, but it's like I had this rude awakening, for lack of better wording. I don't know, maybe I started reading certain books, or I don't know, but at 16 or 17, it's like a switch went off in my head, and I would look at him, I thought, what the hell? And ever since, I was looking at my father as the person that he was. Before my 16th birthday, deep in my soul or my heart, I knew that he was a horrible person, but at the same time, I saw him as my father, meaning he's my father, so he has to be a good person, right? But at 16 or 17, that's when the change happened. And I know from a psychological perspective, it was hard for my father to understand that this little girl was developing her own opinions. And my father grew up in a society or culture where a woman was lesser than, and that was basically how he was treating my mother and me, and honestly any other woman who he ever met in his life, and unfortunately also other people. He thought he was God, basically. And as I said, 16, 17 years old, that's when I just started like waking up. And I guess in his mind, that meant I was being rebellious. I don't know, maybe I was rebellious, I don't know. But in my mind, I was 16, 17, I was a human being, I was an individual with opinions and desires and needs. And it was, I mean, every 16 or 17-year-old gets to the point where they want to know who they are. They want to figure out what does life have to offer to them. And I was one of those 16 to 17-year-olds. For my father, that was unspeakable. That was, how should I put this? I guess the best way to put it is his daughter wanting to know who she is as a person. He might as well have gotten shot in the heart. That's how he looked at it. And ever since, I had frictions with him. We had frictions, and I didn't really understand that. It took me a long time to realize that he was not respecting my needs to be an individual. And that's how I started, like, my PTSD started surfacing, my anxiety started surfacing, and this went on for years. And I will admit right now, I was suicidal many times because I just couldn't handle my father. I couldn't handle how he treated us. I didn't know what was going to happen. I couldn't handle it. On one hand, I wanted to run away from my family because I couldn't handle his behavior. On the other hand, I had to protect my mother. And my mother was not able to stand up for herself, so I had to do that. You'll say that's a huge responsibility for a young girl. Possibly. I didn't really think of it that way. I mean, I didn't really think of, oh my gosh, I'm way too young to have all these responsibilities. I mean, there were maybe moments where I thought about it, but on the other hand, I didn't care. All I cared about was I had to protect my mother from this man. Even though this man's my father, I had to protect her from him. And when I was 20, when I was in my early 20s, I started getting suicidal. I wanted to kill myself. And I remember once I just couldn't handle my father, and I was in the kitchen, and my mother stepped into the kitchen. In that moment, when I was about to do something, there was a pot with water on the stove, and it was cooking, and I was right there, and there was some electric gadget, and I was about to put that electric gadget into the pot, hoping that that would electricize me, for lack of a better wording. And that moment, my mother came in, and I wasn't able to do what I was planning to do. And that was for me the biggest shock in my life. My mother had absolutely no idea what I was planning to do. She didn't notice what I had in my hands. She just happened to come in because I think my father needed something. I don't know. I don't remember anymore. But it was like a wake up, like shocking experience to me. However, after that, I still had this desire to kill myself, but I never was able to. I never had the chance really. It just like there was no way. Like when my while my father was around, I did not have a moment to myself. The only time when, and excuse me for TMI, the only time when I had time to myself was when I was in the bathroom. Otherwise, whether I was in my room, anywhere in the apartment, he needed me, he would yell my name, or he would be yelling from the top of his lungs, and I had to have his undivided attention no matter what I was doing. I barely got a good night's sleep when in my late teenage years and into my young adult years. As soon as he woke up, I had to be away because he needed something. And besides that, I was working per diem because I became the breadwinner. Besides, and also helping my mother take care of my father, I was still feeling suicidal, but I never had really the chance to do anything. But I still felt those feelings. And what should I say? While my father was around, the only safe haven I had was going to the library, which again, he was against that. He didn't want me going to the library. He forbid my mother going to the movies. He forbid us anything that was fun related, even if it was totally harmless. He had no tolerance for that. But I still managed to go to the library, and unfortunately, he would punish my mother. Which brings me to the subject of sexual violence. I'm not going to go into detail. I don't want to get graphic here, but I was well aware of this. And also the thing was that although I was an grade A student, he would mentally and verbally abuse my mother and me. For me, my entire life, as long as my father was alive, he would call me names, my mother names. He would call my mother names as well. And when I was a teenager, I was old enough to date. I never did date in my high school years. Besides that, he had his ideas of what dating entailed, but he would call us names, he would call me names, especially ever since I started saying no to him. And if you're wondering what he would ask me about, even if he just asked, do you want chicken for lunch? And I would say no. That was like a crime against humanity. I kid you not. Like, how dare anybody in his apartment say no to him for whatever reason? That's how bad it was. I have to say, I probably should be lucky that I was able to get a glass of water without asking for his permission. That's how bad it was. However, he would call us names, he would call me names, especially after I started saying no to him. He would call us whores, prostitutes, dumb, stupid, donkey, or anything else that I forgot the name, but it would be names that I don't even want to say here alive. They would be calling us names, calling me names, and I that was my life basically. And you're probably gonna say now, well, why didn't the social worker get involved? Well, there were many moments when social workers were involved, either on the records or off the records. But there was always, but after I was 16, after I turned a teenager, there was nothing they could do anymore. Like when I was a child, there was nothing really that they could say or do. I mean, most of the reasons when somebody got involved was because somebody had a beef with my father, because my father insulted somebody, and as revenge, social services would get called. But the funny thing was that although my father was a horrible person, my mother was the complete opposite. She always made sure that I felt loved, and I always had a meal on the table. I was always dressed neatly, so it was just like science fiction movie every time if you visited us. Like my father would be the one who was yelling, who was insulting people, and my mother and I we were like, I don't even know how to describe it. But it was really hard, and we were able to keep up a facade. And to anybody who visited, I mean, they would see my father, they would see us, and it would be like a difference between day and night. And they didn't see anything wrong with me, so they thought there's nothing wrong here. And when I was a teenager, there was again not much that could be done. When I was 14, I think again social services got involved, but then afterwards there was just nothing. I mean, I was a teenager. I guess I was at the age where if I wasn't in school or if something else was going on, that I was a teenager, so that was out of their, I don't know, by law probably out of the work of social services unless I was an orphan, but I wasn't. So there was nothing they could say or do. And um, yeah, what else happened? Yeah, I mean, my father, I don't know, remember exactly what he did, but there would be days when we would be sleeping in the car. Although we had the place to stay, we would be sleeping in the car because he had to beef again with somebody, and he was afraid that somebody was going to barge into our apartment for whatever reason. So we would sleep in the car. Whether I had to go to school on the next day or not, that was that wasn't his problem. And I know that's not funny, but it's more like a sad laughter. And yeah, this was my normal life basically. Although when my teenage years and after this wake up call, I started realizing this is not normal. This is not normal. This is not how a kid should be growing up. Also, there were another time when I was 11 and I had to witness my father getting into a fight with neighbors. And it's a miracle that my mother didn't die. That's how my mother was beaten up. And I had to witness this. He didn't do anything about it. And I have to admit that before that, I was very sensitive as a child. But seeing my mother being dragged when I was 11, seeing her being dragged, seeing my father not doing anything, and then witnessing him when he was talking to the police, acting like this was terrible what happened to my mother, and him. I mean, I think what stood out to me when I was 11 is that although he was there, although he witnessed my mother getting beaten, and although he was unharmed, like nobody, like he was barely slapped in the face, as far as I remember, and he was just sitting there and just watching these people beat up my mother. And to this day, I'm still surprised that she survived that evening because it was late evening. and then him talking to the police and saying they did this and this and this, and I don't know, maybe that was a wake up call for me. I don't know, but I have to say that was like the first moment, or that was the time when I lost my sensitivity. I mean, I probably should have been numb emotionally and mentally. I don't know what another 11-year-old would experience, but for me, that was like, I mean, I was just observing this and just seeing how my father was not protecting his wife, and then later uh, telling the police what happened, like he was blaming the police for not being there when his wife needed to be protected. I can't really explain what I was thinking at that time, but that was such an eye opener for me. And I don't know, something happened in that evening that I lost any sensitivity I had. I lost it. And I'm not saying that that means that I don't have compassion for people, or that I feel ignorance, or that I don't feel anything. That's not the case. I can't really explain what I feel or didn't feel at that moment. But for me, that was like a, huh, experience. And I remember that my mother, after that, in the next years, she would often make hints, subtle hints, to my father that as a man of the household and as her husband and whatever else expression there is there, that he should be there to protect her, but that never, it just never, like, how should I put this? I mean, she would make subtle hints about that, and that just didn't register with him. Like you should be able to understand. Oh, I'm married to this woman. I'm married to this woman, and I should be protecting her. I should make sure that she's safe. My father did not have these ideas at all. Like if anytime my mother was in danger, it was either her fault, or the people who did it to her. But it was never, even if he was present when something was happening to her, it did not occur to him that he had to protect her. And as I said, I don't know what kind of experience, what an 11-year-old should feel at that point. For me, it was just, huh, experience. I can't really explain it, but that's just how I felt. And yeah, that just was my life, basically. And I remember when I was uh, in my early 20s, I would be watching the show Touched by an Angel. That movie, that TV show started to be my safe haven. I started watching it, and every time I watched it, I felt calmer because I was having more anxiety attacks, and because of my father, he would, every day we had to live with anxiety. Every day he would be miserable. Every day he would be bitter. Every day he would say that something was going to happen to us, that something was going to happen to me. And even when I was like, I know this is going to sound horrific, and I think I have to share this as well. Besides whatever you learn in sex education in school, my father's idea of sex education was looking at me from top to bottom, especially when I was a preteen and into my teenage years. And he would basically say, you're going to be old enough, or you're old enough, they could take you. And to me, that meant that somebody would kidnap me, or that I'll be old enough and that somebody would kidnap me to sell me for sex. That was his idea of sex education. And even when I was 15 years old, I mean, I did not really have a relationship to sex. I mean, I didn't care about dating at all. I mean, I don't know. I was talking. I was an outsider. Honestly, I didn't go to the proms. I didn't really talk to boys at school, and not because I was a lesbian. It just I was focusing on. I prefer to focus on my books, on school, to eventually go to college. And so dating was just the last thing on my radar. Honestly, I was a nerd, a geek, whatever expression you want to use. However, hearing my father tell me that I was looking at me from top to bottom and telling me that I was old enough, that I looked old enough to be kidnapped, to be sold for sex. You maybe think that's nonsense and that the father shouldn't be talking to his daughter like that, and I agree with you, but that was the kind of way he was talking to me, and it scared the crap out of me because I believed him. I believed him that any night someone would try to kidnap me and steal me. I didn't really understand what it meant to be sold for sex. I didn't know. I didn't know anything about sex trafficking. I did watch crime shows, but for some reason I didn't connect the dots, and I didn't realize that he was talking about sex trafficking or prostitution. I didn't realize that he was talking about that. But that was his way of talking to me about sex, and I was scared. He scared the crap out of me. I believed him. It never dawned on me that he maybe that was baloney. That it never dawned on me to think, how dare he talk to his daughter like that? I didn't have that idea. I didn't have that mindset. Only after I was 16 or 17, I started realizing, what the hell is he talking about? Like, how can he talk like that? Only then. And my mother, and also unfortunately, another part of sexual violence that I understand is being forced to sex. I witnessed that from my parents, from my father, and uh, my mother couldn't divorce. My mother could not divorce him due to legal reasons. Not going to go into that. And yeah, when I was in my 20s, I would watch Touched by an Angel. It helped me deal with my father's nonsense. And while I was working per diem, I was doing patient care. And in my mid-20s approximately, my father got diagnosed with late pancreatic cancer. It was terminal. He passed away, but he did not, we weren't really able to be there for him because he convinced everybody that he had no idea who we were, that we were not his family. And, well, obviously it was one of the most hurtful things he could have told us, he could have done to us. But that was what happened. And still, even after that, I had to take care of my mother. I couldn't really focus on what I wanted in my life. But I did get to the point where I thought, okay, I mean, it was now just me and my mother. Like as my mother would say, as two girls. But then in 2008, in 2009, I would say, I was in my mid-20s, and it was just the two of us, but I decided, okay, it's time for my mother to have a son-in-law. And again, I was not really thinking about myself. I was thinking about, do I want to have a boyfriend? I wasn't thinking about it. I just thought, okay, it's time for my mother to have a son-in-law. Like, instead of thinking, what do I want as an adult woman, I kept thinking, okay, what makes my mother happy? And so I started, I probably should say I was then in the dating world, but I hate the word dating. I just have a yucky feeling about it. So I would rather say I started getting to know people. I started making friends. And the first guy I was hanging out with, he then was actually similar to my father. It took me a long time to realize it. He was a narcissist like my father. Like, saying no to him it was a crime. And we were, for a year or half a year, we were hanging out. And what made me completely break up with him was when he started calling me names. That was a red flag. I mean, there was often times when I didn't feel comfortable around him, where he did things without asking me for consent. And I realized, okay, this is done. Okay, no. He's calling me names just the same way that my father used to call my mother names. And that was the last straw, that I'm done with this guy. And of course he would apologize afterwards, but I didn't care. And after a year or so, I met another guy, and he seemed to be more mature. He was 15 years older than me, and I decided to be friends with him because we were very similar upbringing. The only difference between us was that his parents got divorced. And so I thought, okay, this guy is probably the right guy. We're very similar upbringing, similar parent situation. We can help each other, have a relationship where we help each other, we're there for each other. Unfortunately, that relationship was also doomed because he was also a narcissist, like his father. I wanted to help him, which again was a mistake because you can't help someone who doesn't see that they have a problem. And my mother was still there, and I thought, okay, he's the right guy. He could be my mother's son-in-law. But then again, he showed his true colors after my mother's passing in 2014. He completely, it's like he did not ignore. I mean, he was present when my mother died, but then it's like he totally forgot about her death. And I was supposed to focus completely on him, and I couldn't do that obviously because I just lost my mother, and I was in school, I was working, and I was just trying to put my life together, especially after my mother's death. And he didn't seem to grasp that. Like anytime, like even a day after my mother's death, he was going through some issues, and he seriously expected me to be there for him, although I just lost my mother. And I was thinking, are you kidding me? I just lost my mother, and you are worried about something. I mean, he wanted compassion for something, and I'm thinking, okay, can we just slow down here a bit? I just lost my mother, literally just lost my mother a day before this. And I mean, if you would have at least said, I know your mother's dead, I know your mother just passed away, and I won't take it, I won't be mad at you, I won't be upset if you're not able to be there for me. I mean, if you would have at least said that, I could have maybe thought, okay, well, I just lost my mother, but I still want to help him. But I just lost my mother, and his idea was, don't I deserve compassion? And I'm thinking, okay, I just lost my mother, and you're asking for compassion for something not related to my mother's death. That was one of my wake up. That was one of my wake up calls, and I just, and then there were some other events, and I just couldn't handle it. And then I tried to go into church, hoping that would help. It did help me to a degree, but there was something additional missing in my life. And then I was on Facebook. Excuse me. I found a murder mystery school, and what attracted me to this murder mystery school was this animation of a woman holding a sword over a knight, and that I just thought I have to try this. And before that, I met some people who did Reiki, who did mediumship and all that, and I just felt connected to them. And so afterwards, I went to Mother Mystery School. I went to do meditations, and like all the questions that I've been asking for at least majority of my childhood/teenage years were answered in that moment. And I just felt finally welcome, safe, and I finally found like my home. And seriously, I just I don't want to, like, I felt like Harry Potter in the wizard school. Like I finally found a place where I belonged. And then my meditation guide introduced me to Reiki, and again that just blew my mind, and it started helping me recover from my PTSD, from my anxiety issues, and from my trauma in general. And I just started finding all the answers because I was trying to figure out, okay, why was my father doing this? Why was he like that? what was going on in my family, and I just kept getting answers. And it was such a beautiful experience. And I started combining my medical background with Reiki, and it was just such a beautiful experience. I started learning so much. I started learning so much about myself. I started discovering who I am as a person, and it just helped me find out who I am and what I'm looking for in life. And because I started evolving, I started, I stopped the self-sabotage. I stopped I stopped doing all the negative self-talk that I was taught by my father. Everything that my father was doing to me mentally and emotionally, I was starting to eradicate it. I started telling myself, that's bullshit, that's bullshit. It's like, no, this is wrong, this is baloney. And ever since, I even started uh, learning self-love, loving myself, loving my body, loving who I am in my essence. And because of that, I realized that I want to share my story with you all. I want to share my story with people who I help. I want to help people who went through trauma, who went through different issues in their life, and I've been in the medical field for now 20 years, and there's still some things that doctors can't really explain, and I realized that a lot of things that they can't explain are actually related to trauma. Like I had once, when I was 19 years old or 18 years old, I started getting gray hair. That's not normal for 18 or 19-year-old. And I can tell you right now, it's related to trauma. And I think I don't have here white hair, but at least it doesn't look like it. But I realize it's related to trauma. And so when you release trauma, when you do different healing modalities, I started learning throughout the years. I started healing myself, and I learned how to heal others. I learned how to help clients, how to help people who are struggling with emotional, mental, and physical abuse. You know, people take, I don't have a problem with people taking anxiety medication and whatnot. It just bothers me personally that people get that prescribed like I'm not even sure how to put this. I mean, I was prescribed antidepressants, but I never took it because it didn't make sense to me to take it, because it's not like I was making these stories up that happened to me. It actually happened to me. But when I started being around people who were loving and welcome, I felt calmer. Even the end of Reiki, it was like love from source, and it started helping me so much. And I love, and I don't take that, but I do take sometimes a Tylenol. I take it now only once a month, honestly. I used to take Tylenol or ibuprofen, I don't know, every 2 weeks or something like that. But ever since I've been Reiki, involved with Reiki throughout these years, I needed less and less. And I'm not saying that, that I just personally believe that you should combine everything, modern medicine with holistic medicine. I'm a strong believer in that. And I know, I mean, that's a mini rant of mine. But anyways, this is the reason why I'm doing Reiki and why I'm offering Reiki to people, like to you all, because I've been there, I've witnessed it, I've lived it, I've survived it, and I want to help you heal from your traumas as well. That's why I'm doing this. So I'm going to be sharing this on my Facebook page as well and other places, and yeah, I just wanted to share this, and I hope that I can help you if you feel that my video resonates with you. Love you.